Even though those knees were destroyed because of athletics more than anything else.
Yeah. Basketball. He used to play basketball.
I was 42. I went in first time I told her discus. Came in with the X-ray. Didn't even see what it was. Happy says, "How long did you catch?" That was the first word he said. I stood up and said, but he said, "You tell by the believable." But that's only put everything else. All set, Vicki?
Gee, the camera seems awful high, doesn't it?
I'll call this public meeting to order, and as is our custom, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're gathered here this evening pursuant to a notice by the town clerk of a public hearing on the recall petitions, 3 recall petitions. As you all know, this is being televised. We have children not only present here, but I assume that may be watching at home. So for obvious reason, we're going to maintain some kind of decorum. We won't tolerate any cussing, obviously. No hollering. No vindictive personal attacks. If you have any questions, you'll direct them through the chair, please, and then we'll go from there. I thought about some kind of a little process, so I thought we'd have, if any statement by the selectmen who are being recalled, we'll start with those. If there are any statements by those residents who favor the petition, we'll let them go next. And then if there's any, just a statement, no questions. If any resident who's against the petition for recall, then we'll follow up with those statements. And then from then on, we'll open it up for questions. So, do any of the selectmen wish to care to make a statement? Marcia?
Yes, but I have quite a lengthy statement because I've never spoken at a meeting before.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to speak about the original thing that got this started, our sale to Joe Chambers' wife. And I know a lot of people think we gave the house away. Well, we didn't. It's right in line with what rundown apartment houses sell for in other towns that are tax-acquired property. And if anybody cares to, they can check Sanford and Dover. I was told some of the ones that sold there. My concern when we voted that was that the town not get, put it bluntly, stuck with it. Ray Edgerly's garage is this far from that house. The house up the street is not more than 5 or 8 feet. There's 3 houses in the back right on top of that house. And if it goes, the school building was broken into 3 times. The outside was brick and cement, so they couldn't start fires. They broke in on 3 occasions trying to start a fire in that building. And if I remember correctly, Mrs. Murphy had one years ago on First Street that became vacant until a boy broke in and set it on fire. It affected houses across the street. It melted their vinyl siding. And I didn't want the town to have that building, because it would only have been a matter of time till somebody tried to start a fire there. And I implore you to drive by and see how close those other buildings are. The prior owner was known for having very, very poorly maintained houses that he's owned before. I was code officer, I'd gone in them and saw how bad they were, so I knew this would be the same way. And that's why I voted. I would have voted to give it to anybody who made the bid. And that was my reason for that. And I would also like to mention, for the benefit of the viewing audience, that the group fighting this is just about the same group, to the man, that tried to block the SAFER grant for the fire department back in 2007. They, at that time, had the Attorney General check into it. He found nothing wrong, and therefore the grant went through. Everything was above board, and there was no problem there. And I guess maybe that's enough for tonight. That was my reason.
Thank you. Mr. Chambers?
Yes. I would like to say that my wife did put a bid in on this piece of property 2 weeks prior to putting in a bid for this piece of property. I sat in Mr. Stone's office and I requested a list of all the apartments that would be available for sale in the area, for I was interested in doing that. I asked him, since that was one of the properties that he presented with me as far as paperwork goes, I said, the town owns this piece of property. You being a former chairman of the board, does this cause a problem? And he stated, get a straw to buy it or put a bid in for you. So that's what happened. After prayerful consideration over putting in a bid on this piece of property by my wife, we put in a bid of what we could afford. No more, because we have the idea and philosophy that we shall live within our means, of which we attempt to do all the time. I recuse myself from any and all discussions, votes, and everything else pertaining to this piece of property. The vote by the Board of Selectmen was a 3-to-1 vote with me abstaining. So therefore, it did pass through the board. We were more than happy to even not accept it. There was some accusations that we had maintained personal property of the previous owner. Doors and refrigerators are not classified as personal property. That was attempting to be removed from the property, and I would encourage any, and I mean any taxpayer, if there is a town piece of property and somebody is hauling something out of that piece of property, to do their duty as a taxpayer to question that activity. Also, as far as refusing to recall or not to accept the bid, I had no actions in that decision making, and I was more than happy, along with my wife, to not even accept that property. But we, once again, we prayerfully went into the decision and was more than happy to accept the results. Now we have attempted to make it a livable piece of property. We have also satisfied some liens on the property through the sewer department, and other finances have been occurred through getting this building so it's livable. As far as the whole process of the sealed bid, any person sitting in this room, in the listening audience, or anybody in the surrounding area whatsoever that receives a Foster's Daily Democrat is able to go online to look at the Berwick website, or is able to get up and come to the town hall and view the posting, would have seen that this piece of property was up for sealed bid. We did not hinder, we did not block, or any other way interfere with anybody else bidding on this piece of property. They had absolutely the same rights as my wife did to bid on this piece of property. Also, in conjunction with that, since this has gone through, there's been several comments made that has been extremely demeaning to myself and my family, and feel that that is not only extremely childish, but a direct insult on me, who probably very few people actually know me and my family. I would encourage anybody to give me a call and ask me about me. I have put my best foot forward in this town since the day I was born. I have lived here my entire life. Not for a very short period of time or anything else of other people that have requested or decided to make accusations or notions. I have lived here. I have devoted my time and my efforts to this town for many, many, many years. And I have one agenda at hand, and that is the well-being of this town and for the future of my family, because this is a wonderful town that I have lived in. And I am going to continue to be involved with the town. So to that, I would leave my comments as they are.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. There's some seats back there if you folks want to have a seat. Mr. Ramsey?
Thank you. This recall all started because the Board of Selectmen simply took a vote. And that vote strictly followed town policy. A group of people didn't like that vote. And here we are today. Well, we were elected to make votes to run the business of the town. And that's what we did. And we have a colleague who made a compelling, he's not at the table here, but we have a colleague who made a compelling argument of why we should award the property to a single bidder. And he's not being recalled. What's up with that? That tells me there's a flaw in the ordinance. Same vote, no recall. And by the way, before I forget, it was in the newspapers, but not everybody reads the newspaper. There was a criminal complaint filed against the Board of Selectmen, or I'm not sure if it was Board of Selectmen or one particular selectman, on what happened with that piece of property. And we were completely cleared of any criminal wrongdoing by the Attorney General of the state of Maine. I don't think this recall process has been very well thought out, because there's going to be a period of time when the government basically shuts down. However, with the three of our help at the table, we were not spiteful. We passed a policy to help us get through just in case we are recalled, that the town can at least pay wages, state fees, and I guess the school department. Another thing, which is will be very confusing in this process, well, there's going to be two sets, if we get recalled, there'll be two sets of nomination forms going around town at the same time, which I think will cause confusion to the voters. You know, what am I voting? What's going on here? What's, you know, why do you have so many people running for, you know, for office? We've also had to spend extra money for this special election, and our annual town meeting is, what, just a little over 3 months, or a little, real close to 3 months away. It couldn't wait till the annual town meeting. And we've also had to pay attorney's fees, which is more money spent. The basic flaw in the recall ordinance is there's no just cause. You can recall anyone for any reason. It can be hatred, it could be a vendetta, it could be biased, how you spell your last name, and so forth. Now, I'm not even sure if we need a recall ordinance. I'm not against one if it's worded properly, but the state already has one. And it's set up far better than the one that we have right now. And a big question came up about advertising. Well, our town attorney wrote us back after we got the AG's answer to the criminal complaint, and we actually exceeded advertising. So the state's standard for advertising. So anybody that had an interest in that piece of property probably knew about it. And why they didn't put in a bid, don't know. But in any fact, we fixed, not one person, not one board of selectmen, but 5 board of selectmen fixed that tax acquired property policy. And it's available to anybody. Keith can run it over if you want that question sometime, or just ask for it and he'll provide it to you. I think one of the reasons for the recall is it's a rush to maybe embarrass and vilify the sitting selectman. It must have an agenda of why it's so important to rush when we could do it cheaper in a more orderly fashion without shutting down government and affecting government. Town managers already had to warn his department heads. They may not be able to pay any bills, and asking their vendors if they can, in case this happens, it's just giving them a heads up. Sir, this is going to be the end of my second term. My term's up in May. And I'll tell everyone, and the people that know me well know so, I've worked as hard as anyone during these 2 terms to do the best I could to improve Berwick and try to make it a better community. And if you look at the way I've voted over the years, I've always tried to bring the tax rate down. Last year was a tough year. There was many reasons for it. And town manager could go into that real easy and explain that real quick. I can explain it too, but we're more here about the recall. We're really at a kind of a crossroad where are we going to start playing a recall game because you may recall us, others get in, other people turn around, they recall. So it could be an endless wave of recalls. Do we really want to go down that path? Now, if we didn't have annual elections every year, maybe. but we have elections every year. You don't like what you got up at the selectmen's table, you vote them out. You vote somebody else in. That's the democratic form of government. Right now, it seems to be with these petitioners that it's more of should be our way or the highway. And that's getting away from a democratic form of government. And I'd hate to see Berwick go down that path. But the citizens of Berwick are going to have to, sort that out for themselves and decide what they feel is best. I think our current democratic government works just fine, especially with elections being held every year. And once again, I'm proud of the job I've done as Selectman. No one's outworked me. And I hate to see all the dirty, nasty, divisive politics that I've seen in the last several months. I won't go down in that cesspool with others, but I would ask and have people start seeing for themselves to look at some of what's going on in your town, because you missed some stuff. And this cable access channel is going to be one of the best things this town's ever got, because it'll put out truthful, information right in front of your eyes. You'll hear it, you'll see it. You won't have to rely on another news feed that might put out misinformation and just disparaging, comments about elected officials and so forth, which everyone has freedom of speech, no big deal. But it's getting the accurate information, which is the most important. And the cable access crew has done a great job with this, and I think they're still tweaking it. But like I said, the state already has a recall ordinance. And to go down a path of recalling 3 people because they simply took a vote. That's all we did. And it was exactly by town policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the proponents for the petition wish to make a statement? What's your name, sir?
Tom Levine.
Sorry.
Nice to see you.
I got Mike Doran. I got Tom. Does anybody who wish to make a statement? You want to make?
Not for or against, but because my.
Then you'll have your turn. You'll have your turn. I want anybody who wants to talk for the petition or for the recall. Oscar, you got your, no? Mr. Long?
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Then after that, I'll do those opposed to the petition, and then anybody else wants to make a general statement, you may. Mr. Doran?
My name is Mike Doran. I've been in this town all my life, just like everybody else in here has. My family's been in this town since 1850. One of the reasons nobody's mentioned why this recall petition was put forward was when there was 200 or 300 people showed up to a town hall meeting and overwhelmingly voted no, that 3 selectmen went against the will of the people and went against what we wanted, period. Whether you like it or not, we the people are your bosses. We are in charge of you because we're the ones that put you up there. And if you aren't happy with the recall, maybe you should have written a better one for yourselves after you wrote it and then complain about the way it is. Doesn't make any sense. So nobody mentioned that. That's the reasons why I felt the recall is necessary. You went against the will of the people very blatantly and very obviously. That's just what I had to say on that.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. Levine?
Tom Levine. I've lived here for 17 years. I served on the board. Frequent commentary about my term. It usually comes from one place because it's all the same words. But aside from that cowardice, I I'd like to address or rebut some of the statements the three of you made. Of course, you're not going to support the recall. That goes without saying. But I would take exception to you, Marcia, plucking at heartstrings, calling out the man who attempted to block the SAFER grant. If you're going to say that, you should use the facts. I did not attempt to block the SAFER grant. Excuse me.
You, I said the
Yes.
same group
Yes.
to a man. Oh, I'm sorry. I won't reply to anything
No,
again.
and, go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. So I'd just like to clarify, you're not wrong. I did work on the SAFER grant, but specifically my work with the SAFER grant was regarding the application riddled with errors, whereas the application cited, I'm talking to you. The application cited a volume of fires, a certain number. The town report cited a different number of fires. South Berwick Dispatch had yet a third number of fires. I asked the question at the meeting. I was turned away. I asked everyone at the board, can you explain this? Nobody answers. I understand you guys don't have to answer in public comment. Is that too close? I don't mean to irritate more than I may. So I didn't try to block the SAFER grant. I questioned the application process. There was another element of that process where the assistant fire chief's pay was coded to the Board of Selectmen's budget. That was critical because there's a question on the application that states who's paid, who's volunteered. So it looked like the assistant chief wasn't paid. That's fact. We have the W-2s. We had it corrected. I asked the town to perform an audit after. It was corrected then. But those are the facts. I didn't try to block the SAFER grant. I questioned its merit where prime tanning closed down. We simply don't have the activity that it seems our fire department's budget shapes itself around. We have vehicles that rarely move, and most recent, we're getting more vehicles. It's a time for cutting. It's not a time for reckless spending. And it's also not a time to twist the facts. Those are the facts. That's why I pursued the SAFER grant. I didn't try to block it. You didn't answer me, so I went to the Attorney General. And finally, what you stated, the Attorney General cited there was no wrongdoing. Again, that's not correct. What the Attorney General said is, we don't enforce that. We can't do anything about it. That was the conclusion of the Attorney General. The next one, Mr. Chambers. While I appreciate your hard work, and I know that was at risk in the process of acquiring that real estate, you need to understand my point on that was not the house. It was the process. I asked, did Selectman Chambers come in and ask if any bids were received? 4 times, no. Then suddenly it was yes. Then suddenly it was everybody does that. You know what? Maybe if you'd answered me in the first place, maybe we wouldn't be here. Not that that's an acceptable answer, but you stonewalled the people that raised the questions. And then, not you, the board. I'll make that correction. My apologies. So it's a process. The process that you operated under, or the umbrella of ethics, was the sealed bid. I don't care. It's my opinion, mine alone, I'll say, that you cannot call it a sealed bid process if someone goes in and says, are there any bids received? You've breached the sealed bid process at that point. It's no longer objective. You now are you have in your hands information that no one else has. In theory. Nothing personal. I've suffered the same slings and arrows that you guys have, so cry me a river. Okay? I have firemen, I have firemen's wives, all attacking me. I'm trying to get our board to, at the very minimum, meet their own ordinances. You're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to participate in tax sales. You have an ordinance. You don't answer. So I fight it. So I get the same stuff you get. Trust me. Jim, you ask why we're here. You ask, is this the beginning of a rolling process of recalls every time 300 people are upset with who's sitting at the board? Probably. I think that's democracy. I, too, am thrilled Comcast is here. I'll say it. Your behavior has greatly improved with the cameras rolling. As an elected official, you should never utter some of the words you have in the past. And why is it the three of you and not the other selectmen or the other selectmen? You all vote alike. You look at each other. Where are you going with this one? 3-2. 3-2. Everything that passes this board is 3-2. Selectman Murphy can stand on her soapbox and try to convey what's right, what's moral, what's ethical. It's 3-2. It doesn't matter. That's what's ired the citizens. You don't vote for the citizens, you vote for each other. That's the appearance. And last, in closing, I know I got that. This action of the recall, you know what, it's been a year of this kind of thing. Uprisings all over the world, all over the country, occupy this, occupy that. It's because people have had enough. People have had enough of corruption. It's nearly accepted in the administration of this town for 10 to 12 years. You operate inside a bubble. You do deals in here that nobody knows about. We've done research on some of your real estate deals. I know you can't. And in its simplest form, while Barbara Martin was the town clerk, you had another person did notarize those documents. Well, that same person also witnessed those documents, which is in violation of the notary handbook, which I'm sure Judy can attest to. It's on page 11. You cannot witness and notarize a document. That person would have suffered the same fate that our current town clerk did. I support the recall because it's time for us to take it back. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So, Mr. Long?
Good evening. First, I'd like to say to Mr. Snopey and Mr. Wheeler, I'm grateful that they came here and they gave the people that couldn't come to these meetings the videos up online. It was no way in Sway. It was other people in the community, Jim. It was other people in the community, as well as those people commenting on those videos. It wasn't Mr. Wheeler's interpretation. It wasn't Mrs. Wheeler's interpretation, neither one of the Stopes. It was facts. It was facts when you hollered at people. It was facts when we saw this board 3-2, 3-2, 3-2, every day in, day out. I'd also like to remind you, Jim, that Mr. Doran's the petitioner. He gave enough evidence to have people sign that. So it wasn't 600 petitioners. And let's not forget the work of Mr. and Mrs. Roderick. They're the ones that brought the petition that you guys says, no, we don't want that. We want this petition. And now you complain about it? Jim, for 10 weeks, you went on and on about we haven't had enough time to evaluate it. We haven't enough time to evaluate it. If you really look at that petition, less the signatures, it's a page and a half. 6 weeks with 5 Board of Selectmen, a town manager, a town attorney, probably your own attorney. Come on, you've had enough time. You guys think this is all about 9 Rochester Street? That's only a small portion. Jim, I'm calling you because of how you treated Mr. Schlossberg in this meeting. An elderly gentleman crippled, and you berated him. That was unacceptable for anybody. That's one of the reasons why I'm recalling you. Mrs. Elton, I agree with Mr. Levine. I have 9 of the deeds that came out of this office that you currently or past owned, and I tell you, at least it's some discrepancies, okay? It's my time to talk. I've had to listen to you guys for a year and a half without him letting people have public comment.
Mr. Long, please, move on. Thank you.
And finally, Joe, I called you for the Bateman project. And you went on and on about religion and different things and how you were going to do this. I sat with Mr. Stone and this gentleman here. And you came up to the front row and you said to the Batemans, I've got to ask some tough questions, but don't worry about it. I'm still going to vote for it. And you know what pisses me off about the whole dang thing? You 3 signed that without even reading it. Without even reading it. Shame on you. A 75-year lease. Mrs. Murphy can state just what the town attorney told her. There's been some modifications. Mr. Stone tried to get it at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Couldn't get it. It's not available. There's no way you could have read that. And like the other gentleman said, you went against the will of the people. And I guess in closing, I have other stuff that I will give to Mrs. Murphy, and I hope that she shares it with Mr. Crichton. And I'll see you all on February 13th, and I hope they recall every one of you. Shame on you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Does anybody want to talk for, against the recall? Eleanor, you want to make a statement?
Yes.
You want to go to the podium, please?
Do what?
I want you to go to the podium, please.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to people, though. I am the Mrs. Murphy that was referred to about having an apartment house burnt. And yes, my late husband and I did have an apartment house burn on First Street. It was set afire by the grandson of the woman who lived across the street, whose home, the vinyl siding was all destroyed. We paid to have that vinyl siding repaired, put on new. We also, the place did not burn completely. We tore it down, cleaned up the whole thing, filled in the cellar hole, and sold the property, and there's homes on it today. And everything there was hauled off and disposed of. And when we got through with paying for everything, the insurance was gone. So we did it and did what we were supposed to do. So I don't know what that has to do with Rochester Street or anything else. I really don't. But I want everybody to know that I am the Mrs. Murphy they were referring to.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Mr. Viggy.
Hang on a second. Does anybody else want to make a statement? A statement. Mr. Stone?
Well, I want to rebut a couple of things that were said.
Yeah, hang on a second. Any of the selectmen want to make any further statement?
Yes, I do. When I referred to Mrs. Murphy's house, it wasn't that it wasn't,
Drop it.
Eleanor,
wasn't
please.
that it wasn't taken care of. It was the fact that when it's vacant, kids come in and try to start fires. That was the only point I was trying to make.
Thank you. Joe, you all set? Jim? You all s-
A statement or rebuttal?
You can do some rebuttal, as long as it's something that was said.
Okay. Mr. Levine, you talk about behavior in words. How about, and it's on mini tape, it's on people that won't even come to these meetings anymore, how the audience acted. And as chairman, I was being constantly harassed. And we had business to do. We had the town's business to do. And I was continually being interrupted. So I had to run the meeting the way it's supposed to be run. What was wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. You'd have to run it the same way, or at least you should run it the same way. And I've had, I don't know how many people tell me I'm not coming to another meeting because of the way that audience acted and the lack of civility from it. And you can go back any tapes, whatever, you know, look them up. As far as corruption, I'm really lost on that one. Any votes made that affects this town are always made at the selectmen's table in public in regular session. Any vote since I've been here. So where the corruption's coming from, I have no idea. And I think it's a false charge. You may not get the answers you want, but the town hall is not corrupt, and neither are the selectmen. You've tried proving it. As far as the selectmen, you haven't gotten there yet. And you never will, as far as I'm concerned. And I did not ask why we are here. I said that brings us, I made a statement, said that brings us here. Important point. Mr. Long, I do not remember berating the elderly man. I had to speak up to take control of meetings more than once. And that was necessary. I didn't want to have to start throwing people out the door, which I could have done, but I didn't. And everyone was pushing me right to the limit, and that's fine. I took it. But if people are chatting the whole time when you're trying to run a business meeting, you have to take control, and you have to speak up, and you have to be a little louder. And that's all it was. And you can look up, like I said, before we even started taping, any tape that we own, you will not see me hollering and berating people in any way, shape, manner, or form. Maybe a little testy once in a while, possible, but not rude and obnoxious of what I've seen. And Mr. Long, there's other stuff, but I'll leave it. I'll leave it because I don't want to go.
Thank
I
you.
don't want to go down that road.
Thank you. Mr. Stone?
Mr. Chairman, you know, about 4 years ago, I stood before you and the board, and I gave you a dictionary. You claimed I threw it at you. And in that dictionary, I highlighted the words that I thought should be important to you and the board. You know, things like honor, integrity, trust, character. And I don't know what happened to the dictionary, but I know apparently you didn't bother to read it or understand what those terms mean. I stood up and I told you that I was ashamed of the way you and the board conducted the town's affairs, and also embarrassed as a citizen and a former selectman. Okay? Now you say no votes are ever taken. I have yet to hear this board stand up and say, or read the finding of facts for the old high school and how you guys possibly determined giving that building away for $1 a year and the taxes benefits this community. And I'd glad to listen anytime. Okay? Now, I'd like to speak to, you also said that you were cleared by the Attorney General. The Attorney General doesn't clear you. He simply said he wasn't going to prosecute. There's a big difference. You can ask Councilor Vicky, who's sitting here beside you, after we're done. And as far as you, Mr. Chambers, tell me what positions you serve for this town. You're a selectman, overseer of the poor, and an assessor. You tell me how many refrigerators and building materials you tax. Can he answer that, Ronnie?
No, make your
Oh, I'm
statement.
sorry, that he can't answer that. Well, as an assessor, you should know better than saying appliances are not personal property, because they certainly are. Okay, one last thing. You made a comment. You said you recused yourself, and then you said you abstained. How is that possible to recuse yourself and then abstain voting? It can't be done. And again, you're going to ask your moderator or whatever you want to call him. If you recuse yourself, you step down and you sit with the audience and you don't participate. If you participate, you sit up there. When they call for a vote, you vote. And when you abstain, you explain why you're abstaining. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Anybody wish to make a statement? Is this going to be a rebuttal, Mr. Long?
Yes, it is. I think the chairman was totally out of line with something he said, and I'd like the people to know the truth. Jim, I sat at home on the tape that Mr. Stolpe or Mr. Wheeler taped, and at the end of the meeting, I saw Mr. Schlossberg in a wheelchair. I saw Mr. Hall there. I saw Mr. Levine there. At the end of the meeting, he says, I got one more thing. You guys are all here talking about us, talking about ethics. Talking about us, talking about that. What about if I'm the guy and I do the right things and I pay my bills and stuff? This man is 80 some odd years old, had 5 heart attacks and 3 strokes or vice versa in a year and a half. And you berate him over $7,000? That's what it's all about. That's what I meant by berating, Jim. That's what I meant.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Any other statements, comments? Is it Mr. Wheeler? Is that your name, sir?
Yes, sir.
Been a while.
No, I was just looking up, there was just so many interesting things to talk about this evening, but definition of corruption. The change from good to bad in morals, manners, or actions. Before I looked that up, I wrote down corruption. I guess my definition would be is an elected official serving an interest other than the public's they were elected to serve. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. You have a comment, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, sir.
Would you, Rodriguez, I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me.
You're welcome, sir.
I've had my name butchered a few times, too, over the years.
I guess what I've come to realize is there's something we're deciding here. And what we're deciding with this recall is whether we are going to accept town officials who, when asked a specific question about a specific item, need to answer the people asking that question. When I first became involved in all of this was August, at late July, early August, after the 9 Rochester Street deal, after a real estate deal that some would think was a questionable real estate deal. The town was considering entering into another real estate deal that some would figure was a questionable real estate deal. Some would also question as to whether the town had accurate facts about this real estate deal we were entering into. We had a town meeting to vote on several very specific articles that dealt with that real estate deal. Prior to that, many of the townspeople asked for information. We received no answers. We had that meeting. The vote overwhelmingly shot down those articles that would have benefited this real estate deal and would have shown support for this real estate deal. At that town meeting, some of us asked the select board to please listen to what the people of your town are telling you and do not enter into a lease with Bateman Properties. We asked. We asked for more information. We asked for financial information. We received no answers. The town had another meeting. Bateman brought their lawyers. They said if we didn't sign it, basically they were going to sue us. Our lawyer said, basically, let them sue us. They don't stand on any ground. Again, the townspeople asked, do not sign the lease. The meeting ended, testimony was over, 3-2. The lease was signed. The lease was signed. The night before that meeting, I called the 5 selectmen, and I asked them, please, to think about the information that they were giving forth, to think about the source of that information. Information comes from different sources. People who have different motives provide different information. They point out different positives and negatives. It was clear from what some of the townspeople were hearing that the positives the selectmen were hearing were from 2 sources, the town manager and the developer. They were all pros. It was a rosy scenario. The town manager is quoted in a newspaper article in the spring stating that the income from this development could be used for the town's capital improvement program. So again, we're letting the people know this is a great financial benefit for the town. We asked, we the people, what is that financial benefit? Tell us. Received no answers. We asked, don't sign the lease, please. Give us more time, let's talk. No talk. After the meeting, 3-2, sign the lease. So I guess as a citizen of Berwick, I do not feel heard. I believe 300 of us that night did not feel heard. 9 Rochester Street, that was a start. Some of us feel that was a bad deal. We're clear tonight that others believe that was a good deal, perfectly legitimate. We have a difference of opinion, and the recall ordinance will sort that out. What I want to say, though, is people make mistakes. 9 Rochester Street could have been a bad deal, could have been a mistake. In fact, I think Selectman Creighton, in the work he has done to make sure there's a policy in place so that that does not happen again, is saying that's a mistake. Let's fix this. Whether it's legal or illegal, just doesn't feel right. Kind of feels like some insider information here, and we shouldn't do this. So here we are 6 months later, or 7 months later, we could be saying, yeah, you know, that was a mistake. If I had it to do over again, I wouldn't do it. We can tell you guys don't like it. I wouldn't do it. If that's what I heard tonight, then maybe I'd vote no on February 13th. That's not what I'm hearing tonight. And I don't believe that's what's thought about the Bateman project either. And that's why I will vote yes on February 13th.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
I'm going to be short and sweet.
Your name, please?
Jody Wright, 12 Wilson Street,
Thank you.
the house on Wilson Street. Joe, I've said it to you in person in a side conversation that I was disappointed in you signing the Bateman lease. I told you that there wasn't enough funding put towards the people. There was plenty of funding put towards Bateman and what Bateman needs to do and where Bateman needs to have their pocketbook filled. But there was no money set aside, whether it was federal funds or whatever kind of funds, you know, that you guys like to get, and you signed that lease. And the whole town asked you that night not to sign that lease. Is that correct? It is correct. Marcia told me just a couple of weeks ago that I had misrepresented information, that it was not low-income housing, even though there's tax credits that are under that category, that establishment over there, the housing project, is utilizing. But I misrepresented information, even though the Maine State Housing Association, the one that is funding Bateman, categorized it as low-income housing. I don't mind people having low-income housing. I just don't want selectmen taking a citizen and saying I'm misrepresenting information when it's, you know, zigzag. It's the other way. You misrepresented this to us people. And we've said this time over and time over, Marcia. You can't tell us false information. That's your mistake. If we're not the professionals, I'm not sitting in your seats. Keith can't lie to me, even though he'd like to, but he can't. Okay?
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Dave?
Dave Stolpe. A lot of what I've seen over taping over the last 3 years is, and things you've done may have ended up legal by the littlest of margins, but a lot of what you've done is simply unethical.
Thank you, David. Briefly, Mr. Levine.
Just briefly, Tom Levine again. I just want to say, you shouldn't hold yourselves to any different standard than the rest of us. We all have bosses. If your boss doesn't like the job you're doing, you get fired.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Can I just ask a question, Ronnie?
Sure.
So Ronnie, I just would like to ask the Honorable Mrs. Murphy if she could speak. I've heard a couple of times tonight, I saw where the town manager spoke in the paper about how the business is gonna be shut down. I heard the town, Jim say how the business is gonna be shut down. Mrs. Murphy, is that true? Isn't it state law that we could pay those bills anyway?
Excuse me. Can I close the public hearing and then we'll ask that question and find that out? Is that okay with you? Okay. Any more pertaining to the recall petition? Mr. Murphy?
I'd like to start by thanking everybody for showing up at the meeting tonight, and I hope we have a tremendous turnout on February 13th, the day of the recall. For me, I see it as a day of reckoning. I've attended these meetings for a few years now, once I actually sat on the board. And unfortunately, what I've observed over this past course of time is that as much as my intentions were always good for the town and unselfish, my efforts were always put down by the different board members and the events that happen. I've been attacked personally. I've been attacked professionally. There are members of the board who custom-tailored a warrant article to remove me, cut me short in its definition from sitting on the board. I've made it perfectly clear, and my opinion will stay the same until February 13th. I think the board members, especially the ones mentioned specifically on this board, and past board members this goes for as well, the level of professionalism is substandard to where it should be. February 13th will be a day of reckoning where the people of Berwick can make the correction that I've tried to make along the way during my service to this community in the capacity of a selectman as well as a police officer and a business and land owner. I have some unanswered questions. There are some events that happened to me during the course of my history in politics here in Berwick that I can't seem to get a rational, reasonable answer, and that it's very clear, based on the evidence that's supported around it, that a lot of these decisions are biased. This currently holds true today. That certainly have an adverse effect on my life. My attempts to correct these have been futile. I've talked to every selectman, past and present. I've talked to the town manager. And it seems that I keep getting dragged into this quagmire of unprofessionalism and events. And I'm hoping that on the 13th of February, that the people at home and the people here come in and vote each and every one of you out of office. As far as these questions and concerns with the unresolved issues, I'd like to just tell the board members that I have made arrangements to do more research and find out more answers. On Saturday, February 4th at 10 o'clock, I have a meeting with the governor of the state of Maine and the State House, hoping that he will intervene in some of these issues to bring some reasonable and rational resolve to them. I guess the bottom line is that this recall had to happen, and I found that it was necessary in order to make these corrections to truly make Berwick a better place. Just the opposite, I think, of what the board members were doing.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. There are no more comments, concerns. I'm going to call the meeting to an end. This meeting, public hearing is adjourned. Mrs. Murphy, you want to address Mr. Long's question?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say that I probably, in fact, I know I have lived in this town longer than anybody in this room because I was born here. I never left it. So I'm not going to say my age, but even Ron's younger than I am. But,
Not by much.
Hey.
Microphone so they can hear it.
they can't hear me?
No, I know usually we can hear you up the street.
I just wanted to say that I have lived in this town probably longer than anybody in this room. In fact, I know I have because I don't see anybody any older than I am. And I was born here, and I've never left. But I really believe that when it comes to paying those bills, it would have to go to a judge, and he would give us the right to do that. That is what happened in a town here in York County a number of years ago when they got rid of 2 of the selectmen. There was only 1 left. And the judge gave them permission. It would have to go to the courts to be clarified.
Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of the evening.